"The evidence before this board," the senior member said, his voice carrying the careful flatness of a man who had rehearsed this, "is sufficient to move forward with permanent expulsion." "There is no evidence," Althea said. The room shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just that small, collective tightening that happens when someone says the true thing in a room full of people who have agreed not to. "Dr. Brooks." The principal finally looked at her, and the look said, "Don't. This is a formal proceeding." "Then let's proceed formally." Althea placed her hands flat on the table. "Show me the original documentation. Not the copies. Not the summary. The original records with timestamps and author signatures." Silence. Because there weren't any. And she knew it. And now every person in that room knew she knew it. The senior board member's jaw tightened. "You are a teacher, not this student's legal representative." "I'm the only person in this room telling the truth," Althea said. "Which one of those roles matters more right now?" A board member to the left leaned toward his colleague and whispered something behind his hand. Althea caught the word overstepping. She let it go. She had been called worse by better men. Then the doors opened. Not a knock. Not an announcement. Just open. The way doors open when someone has decided that the room belongs to them before they've entered it. The air pressure changed. Chairman Park Sun-woo walked in wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Althea's monthly salary. He moved without hurry, which was its own kind of authority. Behind him, two aides stopped at the threshold and went no further, as if the room had a weight limit and he was it. He didn't acknowledge the board. Didn't nod at the principal. His eyes found Ji-woo. Just found her. The way you find something you've been looking for in a drawer you weren't sure you'd open. Ji-woo. The girl beside Althea went completely still. Not the stillness of relief. Not the stillness of surprise. Something older than both. Chairman Park took one step forward. Then another. And then he said 4 words that detonated everything in that room so quietly it almost didn't sound like an explosion at all. "That is my daughter." Nobody moved. One board member's pen rolled off the table and hit the floor, and the sound was enormous. Althea turned slowly and looked at Ji-woo. The girl's eyes were fixed on the man across the room, and what was in them was not joy, not relief, not even anger. It was the careful, practiced expression of someone who had learned, through specific and repeated experience, that powerful men who finally show up usually show up because the situation now affects them. A board member found his voice first. "Sir, we had no idea she was. We weren't informed of any connection to." Clearly. The word landed like a door closing. Chairman Park's eyes moved then. To Althea. Measured. Precise. The look of a man who was accustomed to reading rooms and was now trying to read a person. "Why are you protecting her?" Althea didn't blink. Because no one else was. Something moved across his face. Not warmth. Something older and less comfortable than warmth. Something that looked, for just a fraction of a second, like a man recognizing an accusation he had been making against himself for years. Then it was gone. "This," he said, his voice returning to the register of a man who ran companies and ended careers without raising his voice, "is no longer a school matter." The board members began reaching for their folders. The attorney clicked his pen closed. The machinery of authority was already reorganizing itself around him. And Althea stood exactly where she had been standing. Because Ji-woo was still seated beside her. Still accused. Still uncleared. And the way this girl was looking at her father. It was not the look of a daughter who had been found. It was the look of someone watching a door she thought was locked, swing open, and wondering what exactly had been on the other side of it this whole time. If you've ever had to stand alone to protect your dignity, this channel was made for you. Some stories are not just about what happens. They're about the strength it takes to stand your ground, to protect your dignity, and to demand respect, even when the world tries to take it from you. If you've ever had to make a choice that tested your courage, or refused to be bought, silenced, or pushed aside, then you're in the right place. This channel tells stories about women who cannot be broken, and the people who learn, sometimes too late, that integrity cannot be bought. Welcome to Afro Korean Tales and Stories. 3 weeks before that boardroom, Dr. Althea Brooks almost walked past her. It was 7:42 in the morning, and the courtyard was loud with the specific kind of loud that high school produces. Layered, overlapping, performative. Students who needed to be seen being seen. Groups that existed to define who wasn't in them. And in the far corner near the stone bench by the east wall, Ji-woo Park sat alone with a book open in her lap that she wasn't reading. Althea noticed the book first. Then the posture. Then the eyes. Moving carefully across the courtyard the way you move across a room when you've learned to track exits. She kept walking. Got 3 steps past the bench. Stopped. Turned back. Not because it was her job. Because she recognized that particular kind of stillness. She had worn it herself once, in a different courtyard, in a different city, when she was 17 and had learned that invisibility was the cheapest form of safety available to her. She didn't sit down. Didn't make it a thing. Cold morning, she said. Ji-woo looked up. Evaluated her in one fast, practiced sweep. Yes. That was all. But she didn't look back down at the book. Althea walked on. That was the first day. By the second week, she had watched Ji-woo navigate the school the way a careful person navigates a room with furniture in unexpected places. Always aware, never fully comfortable, never letting herself forget where the edges were. In Althea's AP literature class, Ji-woo sat in the 3rd row and never volunteered. But when Althea asked questions that had no clean answer, the moral ones, the ones about whether a character's choice was right or just understandable, Ji-woo's pen would stop moving and her eyes would go to the middle distance the way eyes do when a question has actually landed somewhere real. The other students had already written their narrative. She paid someone to take her entrance exams. Her family bought her placement here. She acts quiet, but watch, she's calculating something. Althea heard all of it. Said nothing. Watched instead. Because in 15 years of teaching, she had learned one reliable truth. The students who got talked about the most were almost never the ones doing the most. They were the ones who threatened something without trying to. The afternoon she found Ji-woo in the east corridor. Althea had been heading to the copy room. 3 students had Ji-woo against the lockers. Not physically, they were too smart for that, too practiced. It was positional. The way they stood. The way their voices stayed low enough to not carry. One of them was smiling in the particular way that means the smile is the cruelty. Althea stopped. Kira. She said it the way you say a name when you want someone to understand you see exactly what they're doing. Don't you have a 3rd period across the building? The smile dropped. The group dispersed. It took 11 seconds. Ji-woo straightened her jacket. Didn't thank her. Didn't perform relief. Just said, "They'll be worse tomorrow." Probably, Althea agreed. Something shifted in the girl's face. She had expected reassurance. She had gotten honesty instead. That afternoon, Althea stayed late in her classroom. Ji-woo appeared in the doorway at 4:15. She came in, sat down across the desk, and for a moment just looked at the surface between them the way people look at something when they're deciding how much to put on it. Then she looked up. "I saw something I wasn't supposed to see," she said. "And I didn't stay quiet about it. That's my actual crime." Althea held the words without rushing them. "Then we don't run from it," she said. Ji-woo studied her. That same careful evaluation from the courtyard, 3 weeks ago. But longer now. More searching. "There was another girl," Ji-woo said. 2 years ago. Different situation, same people. She left the school quietly. I tried to find her online afterward." A pause. "I couldn't." The sentence sat between them like a 3rd presence in the room. Althea felt the specific gravity of it, not just what was said, but what wasn't. A girl who left and couldn't be found wasn't a girl who had simply moved on. The next morning, the notice was posted on the school's internal system. Disciplinary hearing. Park Ji-woo. Charges: academic fraud, integrity violation, conduct unbecoming. Recommendation: permanent expulsion. No investigation listed. No defense procedure outlined. No timeline for evidence review. Just the recommendation. Already written. Already certain of itself. Althea read it twice. Then she printed it, folded it, put it in her bag, and made the quiet, clean decision that would cost her more than she yet understood. Not this one. Not again. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing yet, was that the man whose son had started all of this had already been watching her for 72 hours. And he had decided that if she kept pulling this thread, she would need to be removed before she found what was at the end of it. Chairman Park closed the boardroom door himself. He didn't ask an aide to do it. Didn't gesture. Just turned, gripped the handle, and pulled it shut with the quiet, deliberate control of a man who needed the next few minutes to belong entirely to him. The three of them stood in the sudden silence. Althea, Ji-woo, and the man who had just rearranged the gravitational field of the entire room simply by saying 4 words. He turned back around. For a moment he just looked at his daughter. And in that moment, without an audience, without a board of witnesses, the architecture of his face changed slightly. The authority was still there. But underneath it, something that had no corporate use, something that had probably not been useful to him in a very long time. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. His voice was low, carefully steady in the way that things are when they are working very hard not to shake. Ji-woo's hands were still at her sides. She didn't reach for her sleeves. Didn't look away. "You left," she said. Not an accusation. That was what made it so devastating. It wasn't delivered with heat or with tears. It was delivered as a fact she had finished grieving, a thing that had happened, been processed, and filed into the permanent record of her life. He left. This is who he is. That part is done. The sound it made in the room was extraordinary for something so quiet. Althea stood slightly behind and to Ji-woo's left. She had positioned herself that way instinctively, close enough to intervene, far enough to allow whatever needed to happen between these two people to have its space. She was watching a father encounter the cost of his own choices without the buffer of distance or business or years of careful absence. And he had not been prepared for it. Whatever he had rehearsed on the drive here, whatever version of this conversation he had run in his mind, it had not included his daughter's complete calm. Chairman Park looked at Althea then. "You've done enough," he said. The authority was back, smoothed over what had just surfaced. "You can leave." "No," Althea said. The word didn't have an edge. Didn't have performance behind it. It was simply a word that described a fixed reality. "She is still accused of things she didn't do," Althea continued. "My being in this room or out of it doesn't change that. What clears her name does." Park Sun-woo looked at her for a long moment. In his world, and Althea understood enough to know this, being defied was a thing that happened before people understood who they were defying. After that, it stopped. People learned. People adjusted. People found a way to want what he wanted. This woman had looked directly at him and said no with the same energy most people reserved for agreeing. "You have no idea," he said slowly, "what you are interfering with." "I know exactly what I'm interfering with," Althea said. "A 17-year-old girl's future." He said nothing. Althea glanced at Ji-woo. "I'll give you a few minutes." She stepped into the corridor and pulled the door to, not shut, not open. She stood beside it and looked down the empty hallway and listened to the particular silence of a room where two people are trying to find a language they have never spoken to each other. Then she heard his voice through the gap. Quiet. The authority entirely gone. "I thought leaving was how I kept you safe. I had convinced myself of that. I was wrong about it." A long pause. "I've been wrong about a lot." Ji-woo's response, if there was one, didn't reach the corridor. But Althea heard Ji-woo's chair shift, heard footsteps move, and then nothing. She waited 30 more seconds, then stepped back inside. Ji-woo was standing at the window. Her father stood 7 feet away. The distance between them was not accidental. But Ji-woo had not left the room. For this girl, Althea was beginning to understand, that was not nothing. That was considerable. Then Althea's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. A single line of text. She won't be allowed to speak at the hearing. The decision has already been made. This is your last chance to walk away clean. She read it twice, kept her face neutral, slid the phone back into her pocket. Because whoever sent that message had just made a very specific mistake. They had told her there was a hearing she could still affect, which meant it hadn't happened yet, which meant there was still time. The school's record system was a thing of quiet arrogance. It had been built to look thorough: nested folders, access logs, color-coded flags, the aesthetic of accountability without the substance of it. Althea had been inside it 100 times for legitimate reasons. She knew its rhythms. She knew what belonged and what had been placed. She started with Ji Woo's attendance record. 17 absences in the current semester. That was what the file said. Althea pulled her own attendance records for the same period. She had marked Ji Woo present 41 times. 41 entries, her own password, her own timestamps. The system showed 17 absences. She stared at the screen for a long time. Someone hadn't just altered Ji Woo's record. They had gone into a teacher's submitted data and changed it afterward, which required either administrative access or someone who had found a way around needing it. She printed everything. Both versions. Dated. Time-stamped. The grade discrepancies were less subtle. 2 courses Ji Woo had completed with documented A-range assessments showed C- on the official transcript. The original assessment records were still in the system, filed under the teacher's individual folders where the editor apparently hadn't thought to look, or had run out of time. She was still printing when Ji Woo appeared in the doorway of the classroom at 4:30. She came in without invitation, sat down across from Althea, and placed a small black USB drive on the desk between them. She didn't explain it, just placed it there. Let it sit. Althea looked at the drive, then at Ji Woo. 3 months, Ji Woo said. I've been collecting since October. Screenshots. Copied files. Timestamps. I created a secondary log of every assessment I submitted, kept a personal copy on paper and digital before I turned anything in. A pause. I knew they would come for the records. I just didn't know when. Althea sat back. This 17-year-old girl had been quietly, systematically building her own case in the dark while a room full of adults with institutional power were constructing her destruction. Why didn't you take this to someone sooner? Althea asked. Ji Woo's jaw tightened in the way it did when she was choosing her words for accuracy rather than comfort. The girl who was here 2 years ago, she took evidence to the vice principal. A beat. The next week her guardianship transfer was accelerated and she was withdrawn from school. The evidence she brought in was never logged. Another beat. I was not going to make the same mistake. So she had waited. She had watched. She had chosen Althea not randomly but deliberately, over weeks of quiet observation, and she had brought the drive when she had decided the risk of waiting longer exceeded the risk of trusting. This wasn't a student who needed rescuing. This was a young woman who had been surviving a sophisticated system of erasure with more strategic discipline than most adults Althea knew. I'll need copies, Althea said. Already made 3. 1 with me. 1 in a location no one knows about. 1 with a person outside the school who will release it publicly if I don't contact them by Friday. Althea looked at her for a long moment. How long have you been planning for the version of this where things go wrong? Ji Woo met her eyes. Since the day I enrolled. That night Althea made 2 additional copies of the drive and stored them separately. She was in bed by 11, lights off, half into sleep when she heard it. Her phone. Unknown number. Text message. Stop asking questions. She lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought about the girl who had disappeared 2 years ago. The one Ji Woo couldn't find online. Then she sat up. Turned the light on. Began writing. She was documenting everything now, every discrepancy she'd found, every timestamp, every altered record. In a separate document she was uploading in real time to a private cloud account not connected to her school credentials. If they came for her records next, there would be nothing to find here. And everything preserved somewhere they hadn't thought to look. She had just closed the laptop when she noticed, through the window, that the light in the parking lot below was out. It had been on when she arrived home. She didn't move from her chair for a long moment. Then, calmly, she got up and checked every lock in the apartment. They were all still engaged. But the feeling that settled into the room with her was not reassurance. It was the understanding that someone was measuring her, testing her, waiting to see if quiet intimidation would accomplish what direct warning had not. She turned the lights back off and sat in the dark. She was not afraid, but she was paying attention in a new way. Chairman Park requested a meeting with the school's legal team at 7 the next morning. By 8, Althea heard through the school's internal communication system, thinly veiled, passed through 3 people, that a private investigation had been commissioned. Quietly, carefully, in the specific way that powerful people investigate things when they want the answer delivered to only them first. She understood what that meant. It meant the truth was being filtered before it could travel. She went to find him. He was using the vice principal's office. The vice principal had apparently relocated herself without being asked, and when Althea knocked once and opened the door, he looked up from his phone with the expression of a man who had not yet decided whether to be annoyed. "Your investigation is going to protect the Park name before it protects your daughter," Althea said. She didn't sit down. Standing had a different meaning in the cultural register she understood he operated in. Sitting would have suggested she was waiting for permission to speak. She wasn't. His expression settled into something careful. "You don't know that. A private investigation with results reported only to you. No independent oversight. No timeline shared with Ji-woo or her academic representatives." She held his gaze. "In 15 years I have watched institutions investigate themselves. I know what the structure looks like when the goal is resolution versus when the goal is management." A pause. "Which one are you running?" The question landed in the room. Park Sun-woo set his phone face down on the desk. That small gesture, the deliberate removal of his exit, told Althea something. "You don't understand," he said, "what it means to carry a family name in the context I carry it. There are responsibilities attached to the Park name that exist before I wake up and after I go to sleep. People's livelihoods. Business relationships built across decades. One exposure, one unmanaged release of information, can pull a thread that unravels things that have nothing to do with Ji-woo." "I understand exactly what you're describing," Althea said. "I'm asking you whether Ji-woo is inside that calculation or outside of it." He didn't answer, which was its own answer. Althea felt the familiar quiet anger that came not from disrespect but from clarity, the recognition that this man was not cruel. He was structured. He had built an architecture of priorities over decades, and Ji-woo had somehow ended up on the wrong side of the load-bearing wall. "She knows," Althea said. "Whatever you think you're protecting her from by managing this carefully, she already knows what it means. That she is a complication to be handled rather than a daughter to be defended." The muscle in his jaw moved. "That is not. I'm not telling you what you intend. I'm telling you what she receives." He was quiet for a long moment. That evening, Ji-woo found Althea in the same classroom where they had first spoken. She came in and sat down, and her posture was different. Tighter, the careful blankness back over her face. "You're pushing him," Ji-woo said. "He doesn't respond well to being pushed." "I'm not pushing him. I'm telling him the truth." Ji-woo looked at her. "You're making it worse. Every time you move, they move harder. Maybe I should just—" She stopped, looked at her hands. "Maybe disappearing quietly is smarter." Althea didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it sit in the room and breathe. "And you already tried invisible," she said. "How did that go?" Ji-woo blinked. Something moved across her face, involuntary, brief, completely human. Not a laugh, but the shadow of one. The small, surprised acknowledgement that the truth had arrived in an unexpected shape and was somehow bearable because of it. "I hate that you're right," Ji-woo said. "I know," Althea said. Later that night, Ji-woo was walking past the East Administrative Corridor when she heard a voice through a partially open door. The board member. On the phone. Unhurried, because he didn't know she was there. "If Brooks keeps digging, we file the complaint against her tonight. If the park girl tries to speak at the hearing, we activate the transfer order. Either way, neither of them surfaces from this intact. Are we clear? Ji-woo stood in the corridor, did not move, did not breathe, and understood, with the cold, clarifying certainty of someone who had been preparing for the worst and had just heard it confirmed, that she had never been a student here. She had been a liability they were waiting for the right moment to close. Strong women recognize strong women. If stories like this one speak to something in you, subscribe to this channel. This is the kind of story we tell here. The morning of the ultimatum, Althea found 3 things wrong before she reached her classroom. The first was the look on the assistant principal's face when they passed in the hallway. Not hostility, which she could have worked with, but the specific avoidance of someone who knows something is coming and has already decided not to be involved. The second was that the door to her classroom was already unlocked when she arrived. She always locked it. She had locked it the night before. She remembered the physical motion of it. The third was that Ji-woo's name had been removed from the classroom enrollment list on the shared system. Not withdrawn. Not transferred. Simply removed. As if she had never been assigned there at all. Althea sat down at her desk and opened her laptop and rebuilt the evidence file she'd been compiling. Not because anything was missing. Because she needed the ritual of it. The proof that what she knew was real and documented and beyond revision. At 11:15, the summons came through the school's internal messaging system. Dr. Brooks, please report to Principal Harmon's office at your earliest convenience. She went at 11:30. They were all there. Principal Harmon behind the desk. The school's attorney in the chair to the left. And the board member, Gerald Ashworth, standing near the window with his hands in his pockets and the particular relaxed posture of a man who had already won and was simply waiting for the paperwork to confirm it. We appreciate you coming, Principal Harmon began. Althea sat down without being invited to. She was not going to stand in this room while they delivered what they were about to deliver. Harmon glanced at the attorney. The attorney opened his folder. Dr. Brooks. Given the complications surrounding recent events, the board has identified a path that protects all parties involved. A pause calibrated for effect. You would submit your resignation effective immediately. You would receive a full professional reference letter and 4-month severance. All current matters involving you would be considered closed. Silence. Ashworth turned from the window. His expression was the particular pleasant neutrality of a man extending something he expected to be accepted. Althea looked at each of them in sequence. Harmon. The attorney. Ashworth. No, she said. The attorney's pen stopped. Principal Harmon said carefully, Dr. Brooks, I want you to understand what you would be walking away from. I understand exactly what I'd be walking away from, Althea said. A student who was framed by people in this institution to protect a board member's son. I understand that whoever altered those records had administrative access. I understand that a girl 2 years ago went through something similar and left quietly and no one ever asked why. She looked at Ashworth. I'm not going to be the second person to leave quietly. Ashworth smiled. The smile was practiced and patient and did not reach anything above his cheekbones. That's your choice, he said. Of course. She left the office. Walked down the corridor. Into her classroom. Sat at her desk. She was not shaking. She noticed this. Made a note of it internally. She taught her afternoon classes. All 3 of them. She did not let a single student feel the weight of what was sitting in the room with her. At 6:47 that evening, she unlocked her apartment door. It was already unlocked. She stopped. Pushed it slowly open. Nothing displaced. Nothing missing. The apartment was exactly as she had left it. Books, papers, the coffee cup she hadn't washed, all in their exact positions. Except the laptop on the kitchen table was open. She never left it open. On the screen was a document she had never created. Formatted on her school letterhead. Dated 6 weeks prior. A detailed disciplinary complaint against her. Falsified student testimony. Fabricated dates. A narrative of professional misconduct that was internally consistent and had been constructed by someone who understood how institutional documentation worked. At the bottom, a forged signature. They had not broken in to steal something. They had broken in to leave something. To show her, specifically, deliberately, that the weapon was already built, loaded, aimed, and would be fired the moment she took one more step forward. Althea sat down in the chair in front of the open laptop. Read every word. Then she picked up her phone and called the number she had saved 2 weeks ago. The former student who had left this school quietly 2 years prior, who had told her in a careful, measured conversation that she had a story she had never told anyone in an official capacity. The phone rang 3 times. "I need your voice on record," Althea said. "Tonight. Not tomorrow." A pause on the other end. Then, "Okay." Althea closed the laptop. She did not know, could not have known, that 40 minutes earlier, Gerald Ashworth's attorney had hand-delivered a formal complaint to the school board's after-hours inbox. The complaint was against her. A hearing had already been scheduled. Not Ji Woo's hearing. Hers. And it was set for 48 hours from now. The article went live at 6:04 in the morning. By 6:11, it had been shared 14 times inside the school's parent communication group. By 6:30, Althea's name was in the comments. By 7 o'clock, 3 board members had forwarded it to each other with no message attached, just the link, which was its own kind of message. The headline read, "Student at prestigious prep school accused of fabricating academic record, teacher allegedly complicit." No byline. No named sources. Carefully written to stay on the legal side of defamation while delivering maximum damage. Althea read it standing in her kitchen at 6:47, coffee untouched beside her. She read it once for content, once for structure, once to identify what the writer knew versus what they had been told to imply. Then she put her phone face down and finished getting dressed. Because whoever had planted that story had done it at night, time for maximum morning spread, and expected her to spend the first hours of this day in reaction. Defending. Explaining. Absorbing. She was not going to give them those hours. Chairman Park had read it too. She knew this because when she arrived at the school, he was already in the corridor outside the vice principal's borrowed office, and the particular stillness of his posture, weight forward, jaw set, phone in hand, was the stillness of a man who had woken up to a fire he had not started but now had to decide whether to fight. His aide stepped forward when he saw Althea approaching. Park Sun-woo raised one hand slightly. The aide stopped. "I didn't authorize that article," he said, when she reached him. "I know," Althea said. He looked at her. "How do you know?" "Because it hurts Ji Woo. And whatever your failures as a father, I don't believe you would use your daughter as collateral damage to manage a PR problem." A pause. Ashworth planted it. He's trying to move the public frame before the hearing. If the internet has already decided Ji Woo is guilty, the board has cover. Park's expression shifted, not surprise, but the specific confirmation of something he had already calculated and hoped was wrong. "The hearing has been moved up," he said. 48 hours. "I know that too." He studied her for a moment. In his world, information was currency, and people who had it either wanted something for it or were building toward something with it. He was still trying to locate her angle, still trying to find the version of this where she was operating from self-interest. She watched him look and let him not find it. "How do you do it?" he asked finally. "Quieter now. Stripped of the professional register. Stand in rooms like that without bending." Althea considered the question honestly. "I decided a long time ago what I was willing to lose," she said. "Once you know that, clearly, specifically, without flinching, no one can use it against you. They can threaten what you have. They can't threaten who you are." He was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of disagreement. The silence of a man hearing something he recognized but had no framework for, because his entire life had been built on protecting what he had rather than clarifying who he was. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at it. Something in his face closed. "What?" Althea asked. He turned the screen toward her. A second article. Different outlet. Same invisible source. This one named her directly. African-American teacher with history of student advocacy overreach inserts herself into high-profile disciplinary case. The phrase advocacy overreach was doing very specific work. She recognized it. She had seen that particular framing used before, the way of describing a black woman's competence and refusal to be dismissed in language that made it sound like a pathology. She looked at it for a long moment. "They're not just trying to discredit the evidence," she said. "They're trying to make the story about me." Park said nothing, because they both knew that if the story became about her, her motives, her history, her identity, Ji-woo's case would drown in the noise. That was the architecture of it. She handed the phone back. "I need 2 things from you," she said. "Your legal team's cooperation in presenting the USB evidence as independently verified, and your public presence at the hearing, not behind closed doors, not managed through representatives. You in that room on record." He looked at her. "If I do that," he said carefully, "I am publicly connecting the Park name to a scandal that—" "Your daughter's name is already in 2 articles this morning," Althea said. "The Park name is already there. The only question now is whether it appears in the story of a cover-up or the story of a father who chose truth." The corridor was quiet around them. Park Sun-woo looked down the hallway, toward nothing in particular, the way people look when they are not seeing what is in front of them but what is waiting further out. Then he said, almost to himself, "Myung-yi, honor." The Korean word landed in the English hallway like something that had traveled a long distance. Althea didn't know the word, but she understood the weight of it from the way he said it, not as armor, but as something he was setting down. He straightened, looked at her. "I'll be there." That should have been the moment things began to stabilize. It wasn't, because 40 minutes later, Ji-woo's phone lit up with a notification that made her go completely white. She found Althea in the classroom, held the screen out without speaking. Someone had posted, using a student account, from inside the school's own network, a full thread. Screenshots, partial records, and a fabricated conversation between Ji-woo and an unnamed administrator, constructed to look like Ji-woo had been threatening to expose the school unless her grades were changed in her favor. It had been shared 60 times before the school's IT department flagged it. The hearing was now 36 hours away, and the internet had already begun to decide. Althea found out about Seo-yeon on a Tuesday, but Ji-woo had known since Sunday. She had known and said nothing, had walked into school on Monday with that information sitting inside her and had done what she had trained herself to do with unbearable things, filed it somewhere load-bearing and kept moving. It was Althea who found the thread. She had been going through the metadata on the fabricated student account that had posted the screenshots, working with a contact in the school's IT department who had quietly agreed to pull the access logs before anyone told him not to. The account had been created from a device registered to the school's guest network. Guest access required a sign-in. The sign-in name was a student ID, Seo-yeon's ID. Althea sat with it for a long time before she went to find Ji-woo. She found her in the East Courtyard, the same bench where she had first noticed her, weeks ago. Full circle in the worst possible way. She sat down beside her. Didn't open with the name. Didn't open with anything. Just sat. After a moment, Ji-woo said, "You found it." Not a question. "When did you know?" Althea asked. "Sunday night. There was a message thread, a group I wasn't supposed to be in. Someone added me by mistake and removed me 30 seconds later, but I'd already seen it." A pause. Her name was there. And the timestamps. She'd been in contact with Ashworth's assistant for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The entire time Ji-woo had been sitting with Althea in that classroom, building their case, trusting the process. Seo-yeon had been feeding information to the other side. "Why didn't you tell me?" Althea asked. Ji-woo's hands rested in her lap. Open. Still. "Because I needed a day to be a person about it before I had to be strategic about it." Althea looked at her. That sentence. The maturity of it. The self-awareness required to know the difference between those 2 states and to deliberately give herself permission to occupy the first one before moving to the second. This girl was going to be extraordinary someday. If they let her get there. She wasn't built for this, Ji-woo said. Quiet. Not generous. Exactly. Something more honest than generous. Her family has money because of relationships. Not because of anything solid. If those relationships collapse, so does everything she's ever known. A pause. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying I understand the math she did. Althea waited. It's still. Ji-woo stopped. Started again. She used to bring me food. Korean food, from her mom's kitchen, in containers with the lids sealed because she knew I didn't have anyone making me meals at the house I was staying in. Her voice stayed level. She didn't have to do that. Nobody told her to. The silence that followed had texture to it. Althea made a decision. Did not move quickly toward comfort. Did not rush to the lesson or the framework or the next strategic step. She just let Ji-woo be somewhere in the middle of something real. Then, when the silence had done what it needed to do. Betrayal by someone who also genuinely cared about you, Althea said carefully, is the hardest kind. Because it means both things are true at the same time. She cared. And she sold you out. And you don't get to choose which one cancels the other. Ji-woo looked at the courtyard. A group of students crossed the far end, laughing about something. How do you not go hard? She asked. Not rhetorically. A real question. After enough of this, how do you not just close everything off and stop letting people in? I choose not to, Althea said. Every single day, I choose it. It's not a feeling I have. It's a decision I make. Some days it's harder than others. She paused. The day I stop making it is the day they've won something they don't deserve. Ji-woo absorbed this. Then, quietly, she knows what she did. Yes, Althea agreed. She does. What neither of them said, what sat between them unspoken, was the question of whether that knowledge would stay private inside Seo-yeon, or whether guilt would eventually push it somewhere useful. That question was answered at 11:40 that night. Althea's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost let it go. She answered. Silence on the other end. Then breathing. Then a voice so compressed with something it barely came out as sound. I have everything. Seo-yeon. What they told me to do. What they promised my family. The messages. All of it. I kept copies because... A sharp exhale. Because I knew what I was doing and I needed to be able to prove that I knew. That I wasn't just... She couldn't finish the sentence. Althea gripped the phone. Where are you right now? She asked. My car. In the school parking lot. I've been sitting here for 2 hours. Don't move. Don't send anything to anyone. I'm coming. She was already reaching for her keys when her second phone, the one she used only for documentation, lit up with an automated alert from the cloud account she had set to monitor Ji-woo's case files. Someone had attempted to access the cloud account from an external IP address. They had failed. The two-factor authentication had held. But the attempt had been made 4 minutes ago. Which meant someone knew the account existed. Which meant one of her copies wasn't as private as she had thought. The hearing was now 22 hours away. And somewhere in this school, someone was still one step ahead. This channel is for women who have learned the hard way that dignity matters. If that sounds like you, I'd love to have you here. The hearing room was the same boardroom where everything had started. Same mahogany table. Same arrangement of power. But the room felt different now. Heavier, like a space where too many lies had been spoken and the air had retained them. Althea arrived 7 minutes early. Ji-woo was already there, seated, hands folded on the table with the stillness of someone who had spent the night preparing for exactly this. Chairman Park sat 2 seats away, close enough to signal presence, far enough to acknowledge the distance Ji-woo had not yet closed between them. His legal team occupied the right side of the table. School attorneys on the left. Board members arranged in their familiar arc. Gerald Ashworth sat at the far end. Suit pressed. Expression calibrated. He looked, Althea thought, like a man who had already counted the votes. The board chair called the session to order at 9 o'clock exactly. The school's attorney opened the case against Ji-woo methodically. Records. Timestamps. A pattern of alleged misconduct built from altered files that had been polished into something that looked, if you didn't know what you were looking at, like irrefutable documentation. Then the fabricated complaint against Althea was introduced as supplementary evidence of coordinated misconduct. A board member Althea, recognized as Ashworth's longest ally, leaned forward. The board has serious concerns about the integrity of the defense being offered on Ms. Park's behalf, given the pending professional conduct review of Dr. Brooks herself. The implication was clean and surgical. The defense was tainted. Therefore, the defense could be dismissed. Therefore, the outcome was already determined. Althea watched two other board members exchange a glance that confirmed the count she had suspected. 5-2. Enough to push the expulsion through. Ji-woo sat perfectly still. Chairman Park had not moved. The board chair looked at the school's attorney. Does the defense have any response to the supplementary conduct filing? The attorney Althea had spent the night coordinating with opened his folder. Before he could speak, the door opened. Seo-yun walked in. She was not composed. Her eyes were red at the edges, and her hands were gripping a document folder with the white-knuckled grip of someone holding onto the only solid thing available. But she was walking. Straight line. Eyes forward. She crossed to the table and placed the folder in front of the board chair without being invited to. "My name is Seo-yun Choi," she said. Her voice held. "Just barely. I am a student at this school. I have a sworn, notarized testimony, prepared last night with a public notary, detailing the specific instructions I received from a representative of board member Gerald Ashworth. What to leak, when to leak it, what my family was promised in return." The room temperature dropped. Ashworth's expression didn't change. Which was its own tell, a man whose expression doesn't change when it should have been practicing for this moment. Seo-yun sat down. She did not look at Ji-woo. She was not ready for that yet. Then Althea opened her own folder. "The board has before it a record of Ji-woo Park's actual academic submissions," she said. "Original files, with creation timestamps, from 3 months of documentation that Ms. Park compiled herself, independently, without my involvement, beginning in October when she first identified that her records were being altered." She placed the verified USB report on the table. "These have been independently authenticated by a digital forensics consultant retained by Chairman Park's legal team over the past 18 hours. She placed a second document beside it. "This is a sworn statement from a former student, Maya Okafor, who attended this school 2 years ago, describing an identical pattern of record alteration used to facilitate her quiet withdrawal when she raised concerns about the same board member's son." A board member to the left made a sound that was not quite a word. Ashworth's attorney was on his feet. "The board should note that the authenticity of these documents has not been independently verified by." "They were verified by Park Legal Associates," Chairman Park said. His first words of the session. "Quiet. Final. My firm retained the forensics team. I will personally attest to the chain of custody." The attorney sat down. The room recalibrated around this. Because Park Sun-woo had just publicly, on record, placed himself on his daughter's side of the table. The board chair looked at the evidence. Looked at Ashworth. Looked back at the evidence. Ashworth stood. His voice was still pleasant. Still measured. The voice of a man who has one card left and has decided to play it without showing his hand first. "The board should be aware," he said, "that pursuing this line of evidence will expose this institution to significant legal liability. My family has been a foundational supporter of this school for 11 years. The relationships represented at this table, financial, institutional, professional, do not exist in a vacuum. A decision made today will have consequences that extend well beyond this room." He was not threatening the board. He was reminding them that he owned pieces of them. And from the way two members shifted in their seats, the reminder had landed. The vote had not happened yet. But Althea felt it, the way you feel a scale tipping before the numbers change. The board chair called a 10-minute recess. And in that 10 minutes, Gerald Ashworth's attorney made 3 phone calls. Althea watched him from across the room and counted them. 3 calls. 3 people who had not yet been in the story, about to be. Park Sun-woo stood up slowly. Not like a man making a dramatic gesture. Like a man who had made a decision in private and was now simply making it visible. The recess had ended 60 seconds ago. The board chair had just called the room back to order. Ashworth was settling into his chair with the deliberate ease of someone who had spent 10 minutes making sure the ground was solid beneath him. Park crossed the room. Not to the board chair. Not to his legal team. He stopped in front of Althea. And he bowed. Not the small, transactional nod that passes between business associates. Not a performance for the room. A real bow, slow, deliberate, sustained for 3 full seconds, from a man who had built his entire life on being the person others bowed to. The room went completely silent. Not the silence of confusion. The silence of witnessing something that nobody had a prepared response for. He straightened, met her eyes. "I was wrong," he said, "about what protecting someone actually means. I have spent years believing that control was a form of care. Distance was a form of safety. Silence was a form of dignity." He held her gaze. It was not. It was not any of those things. Althea did not look away. Did not fill the space with reassurance or deflection. She simply received it, the way you receive something that cost the person everything to give. Ashworth's voice came from across the table. "Sun Woo, you need to think very carefully about what you're doing. The Park Group's relationship with Meridian Financial alone." "I know what that relationship is worth," Park said. He did not turn around to say it. "I have known since yesterday morning. I've been calculating it for 24 hours. Now he turned. "I am done calculating." He looked at his legal team. A single nod. They opened the final folder. Inside was everything. Not just the USB evidence. Not just Seo Yun's testimony. The forensic audit of the school's record system going back 4 years. 3 additional instances of grade manipulation tied to Ashworth's son. Financial transfers between Ashworth's family foundation and 2 board members' private consultancies, documented and dated. Chairman Park had not spent the last 18 hours preparing to testify. He had spent them building a case that made Ashworth's legal threats structurally impossible, because the moment Ashworth pursued litigation, the financial documentation would become discoverable. He had given Ashworth one exit: walk away. Ashworth stared at the folder. The pleasant neutrality left his face for the first time. His attorney leaned close and whispered something. Ashworth's jaw moved. He looked at the 2 board members he had called during the recess. They were both looking at the table. The board chair broke the silence. Voice careful. Precise. The voice of an institution trying to locate its own dignity before someone did it for them publicly. "The board will move to review all presented evidence before any vote is taken. Pending that review, the expulsion recommendation against Ji-woo Park is suspended immediately." Then, after a pause that felt like a building settling, "Mr. Ashworth, the board will also be requesting an independent audit of all transactions referenced in the supplementary documentation." Ashworth stood, said nothing, straightened his jacket, walked out. His attorney followed. The door closed. Ji-woo had not moved through any of it. She sat with her hands still folded on the table, and her face had the particular quality of someone watching a structure they had braced against for so long finally, begin to come down. Not with relief. With the careful, disbelieving attention of someone who has been hurt by false endings before and is not ready to call this one yet. Her father crossed the room. Stopped in front of her. He did not reach for her. Did not presume. He sat down beside her, in the chair that had been empty on her left the entire session, and said nothing. After a long moment, Ji-woo said, very quietly, "I didn't think you would actually come." "I know," he said. "That's on me." Another silence. Then, almost too quiet to hear, but Althea was close enough. "Don't disappear again." Park Sun-woo looked at his daughter. "I won't." Althea began gathering her folders, giving them the space. She was almost at the door when his voice reached her. Low, so only she caught it. "This is not over. Ashworth has resources and a long memory. But from here, it ends differently." She paused. Did not turn around. "Yes," she said. "It does." She walked into the corridor. And stopped. Because Ji-woo's school-issued tablet, sitting on the chair outside the boardroom where Ji-woo had left it before going in, was lit up with an incoming alert. An anonymous post. Already circulating on 3 platforms. Ji-woo's home address. Her guardian's name. And a single line beneath it. She thinks it's over. It isn't. If you're a woman who believes respect is worth more than money, go ahead and subscribe. These are the stories we tell here. The post came down in 40 minutes. Platform violation. Coordinated report. Chairman Park's legal team had flagged it within 6 minutes of it going live, and 3 attorneys had spent the next half hour making phone calls that resulted in its removal from all 3 platforms simultaneously. 40 minutes. But in 40 minutes, a post like that doesn't need to stay up. It needs only to be seen by the right person, or the wrong one. The question now was whether the address had reached whoever Ashworth had been calling during the recess. Althea didn't wait to find out. She went directly to the school's head of security, laid out what had happened in precise, sequential language, and watched the man's face move through discomfort and into action. Ji-woo was escorted from the building within the hour. Not in a way that looked like fear. Ji-woo had been very clear about that. Through a side exit, in a car that did not belong to anyone at the school. Chairman Park had arranged it before Althea finished explaining. That was the thing about him. She was beginning to understand. He did not move fast emotionally. But once he moved, the infrastructure of his response was immediate and total. The days that followed had a different quality than any of the ones before them. The immediate noise was loud. 2 local news outlets picked up the story, the real story now, with named sources and documentation. Ashworth's resignation from the board was announced on a Thursday afternoon in the careful, euphemistic language of institutional self-protection. His son quietly withdrew his enrollment. The financial audit was ongoing. Ji-woo was formally cleared on a Friday. The board chair read the statement in a room with no cameras, which told you something about what the statement cost them. But cleared is not the same as healed. Althea watched Ji-woo navigate the school in the weeks after. The whispers had changed register. Now they were about her being a chairman's daughter, about the power that had descended on this institution and restructured it in days. Students who had avoided her now orbited slightly closer, recalibrating. Ji-woo noticed. Did not adjust her orbit for any of them. Seo-yun had been quietly withdrawn from school by her parents, a decision made before any formal consequence arrived, which told Althea that the family had lawyers fast enough to run. Ji-woo had not reached out to her. Had not said she wouldn't, either. She left that door where it was, neither open nor permanently shut. Her father came to the school on a Thursday afternoon. Not announced. He arrived and waited in the courtyard. The same courtyard, the stone bench, the east wall. And when Ji-woo came out at 3:15 and saw him sitting there, she stopped for just a moment. Then she crossed the courtyard and sat down beside him. Not talking immediately. Just sitting. Althea watched from a window on the 2nd floor. Not to surveil. Because the shape of the 2 of them in that courtyard, with the specific distance that was still between them, not hostile, not closed, just honest about where they actually were, was something she needed to see completed. It was not a reunion. It was a beginning. The first page of something that had no guarantee of a good ending, only the honest possibility of one. She turned from the window. On her desk was an envelope from the school board. Formal letterhead. She had received it that morning and set it aside because the morning had had more important things in it. She opened it now. Inside, a commendation. A formal letter of professional recognition for her role in exposing institutional misconduct. And attached to it, a separate letter. An offer. Academic dean. Significant salary increase. A title, an office, a structural authority she had never been given and had never asked for. She read both letters completely, folded them back into the envelope, set the envelope on the desk. She had spent 15 years in classrooms. Not by default, not because she hadn't been offered other things, because that was where the work actually happened. The real work, the kind that didn't show up in institutional records or career trajectories, the kind that showed up years later when a student who had been invisible learned to take up space. She was not going to leave that for an office and a title. She was clearing her classroom, reorganizing, resetting, the physical act of returning the room to itself, when she heard footsteps in the doorway. She didn't turn around immediately. "I already told you," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." "I know," Ji-woo said. "I just needed to see it." Althea turned around. Ji-woo stood in the doorway with the particular upright quality she had not had in the courtyard 3 weeks ago. Still careful, still watchful, but no longer bracing. "Can I help?" Ji-woo asked. Althea gestured to the pile of books on the floor. "Shelves behind you." They worked in silence for a while. Comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be managed. Then Ji-woo paused with a book in her hand. "My father asked about you," she said. Althea kept shelving. "What did you tell him?" "That you don't need to be asked about. That you just are." A pause. "I think that confused him," Ji-woo added. "Good," Althea said. "He could use more confusion. It's where thinking starts." Ji-woo made a short sound, the closest thing to a full laugh Althea had ever heard from her. It was a good sound. Ji-woo came back on a Wednesday. Not to the classroom. She was still enrolled, still attending, still showing up every day with the deliberate consistency of someone who refuses to let other people's actions determine her presence in a space that belongs to her. She came back to the courtyard, the stone bench, the east wall. 7 in the morning, before the school had filled. Althea found her there because she had started walking that route in the morning. Not searching, just choosing it, and there Ji-woo was. Book open in her lap. This time she was actually reading it. Althea sat down beside her without announcement. Ji-woo didn't look up immediately. Then, "He called me last night." "Your father." "He wanted to tell me about a trip he took with my mother. Before I was born. He said he's been thinking about things he's never told me. Things she would have wanted me to know." A pause. "He's bad at this. Talking. He starts sentences and then gets careful and reroutes." She turned a page she hadn't finished. "I told him to just say it wrong. That wrong was fine." Althea looked at the courtyard. Students were beginning to arrive. The familiar layered noise building. "Is that working?" she asked. "Slowly," Ji-woo said. "But yes. I think slowly is okay." Althea nodded. Slowly was honest. Slowly meant no one was performing. She stood to go. "Dr. Brooks." She turned. Ji-woo had the book closed now, held in both hands. "I used to think being quiet was how you survived," she said. Her voice was clear. No performance in it. Just a person stating a thing they had arrived at through cost. "You taught me that being clear is how you live." Althea held those words. She did not rush to respond. Did not dilute them with reassurance or reciprocity. She let them be what they were. Then she nodded once. And walked toward the building. Across the school, in a borrowed office that had begun to accumulate small signs of longer occupancy. A jacket on the hook, a second coffee cup, a framed photo that hadn't been there last week. Chairman Park Sun-woo sat alone. He had cleared his morning schedule. His assistant had been told no calls until 10. On the desk in front of him were Ji-woo's school records. Not the fabricated ones. Those had been purged from the system. The real ones. 5 years of original assessments, teacher comments, progress notes. He was reading them in order. Starting from the beginning. Learning his daughter the only way available to him now. Backward, slowly, through the written observations of people who had been present when he was not. A comment from her 7th grade English teacher. Ji-woo demonstrates exceptional analytical thinking but rarely offers it unless specifically invited. Creating space for her voice should be a priority. He wrote the teacher's name down. He did not know why. He just wrote it down. Nobody saw him do this. He did not need anyone to. Althea walked out of the building at 4:15. The afternoon had gone the way good afternoons go. 3 classes, 1 difficult conversation with a student who needed honesty more than comfort, 30 minutes of actual quiet with actual work in it. The commendation letter was still on her desk. Unopened since this morning. Tomorrow she would write a formal response declining the deanship. She had already drafted it in her head. 3 sentences. Warm, Clear. Final. She walked through the front entrance into the late afternoon light. No escort. No press. No formal recognition of what the past several weeks had cost or produced. Just Althea. Her bag on her shoulder. The day behind her and whatever came next ahead. Intact. Unbought. Unchanged. She was halfway across the parking lot when she thought about the conversation she'd had with Ji Woo that morning. Being clear is how you live. She had not planned to teach that. Had not written it into any lesson. It had simply been the truth she carried, passed between them like something handed across a table without ceremony. That was the actual work. Not the boardroom. Not the evidence. Not the documentation. That. She got to her car. Sat for a moment before starting it. Somewhere in this city, she was certain of this the way she was certain of very few things, there was another girl sitting alone on a bench. In a courtyard or a cafeteria or a library corner. Invisible in the specific way that means someone has decided it's safer. Waiting to see if any adult would slow down. Look. Stop. Althea started the car. Pulled out of the parking lot. And somewhere across the city, a woman who was not yet Althea, not yet sure what she was willing to lose, not yet certain what she was willing to stand for, was walking past someone who needed her. She was 3 steps past. She slowed down. Felt something. The question was not whether she would stop. The question was what she would choose to be in the moment after she did. This channel is for the woman who stopped. And for the one still deciding. If that's you, subscribe. You belong here. Thank you for watching Afro Korean Tales and Stories. As we close this story, I want to say something to the women watching. Some of you have lived through moments like this. Moments where you had to stand alone. Moments where you chose dignity over comfort. Moments where you refused to be bought, silenced, or pushed aside. That kind of strength doesn't always make noise. But it changes rooms. If you are a woman who believes respect is worth more than money, if you believe character still matters, if you believe dignity should never be negotiated, then this channel was made for you. I tell stories about women who stand firm. Women who earn respect without begging for it. Women who remind powerful people that integrity cannot be purchased. If that speaks to you, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this community. And if this story touched you, comment the word dignity below. I read your comments, and they help these stories reach more women like you. Until the next story, remember, not every powerful person leads with honor, but every strong woman carries it within her. I'll see you in the next one.